focus on FAANG stocks. They've led all three major indices in the U.S. to record highs this year. But can that winning streak extend into the new year? Big tech companies competing for hardware sales, user growth, and eyeballs as the streaming wars do grow more intense. Let's bring in Applico CEO Alex Moazed. And Alex, you know, we talk about FAANG, and you actually took the N out, the Netflix out altogether as the streaming wars do grow more intense. Yeah. I was surprised by that call.
FAANG's out, FAANG's in. Get rid of Netflix, put Microsoft in it, keep the platform companies that have defensible network effects. And yeah, I would not be betting on Netflix in 2020.
But they have such scale, and now they're bringing that scale internationally. They've got great content, a lot of money going into that content. Come on.
They have a bunch of scale. They're creating over $12 billion of content every year. The problem is all that content sits on their balance sheet. There's no supply-side network effect. You have magically overnight, in the span of, 12 months, 5 of the biggest companies in the world now, not just in their backyard, but competing directly for their customers in the U.S. And internationally, people just don't want to pay as much money as the U.S. consumer does for media. So if the growth is international, but people don't want to pay as much for the content internationally, that isn't necessarily a recipe for success.
Alex, sticking with the content theme there, so if you look at the FAANG names, they are content providers amongst other things that they do. If you pull Netflix out, which is a pure content play, and you put Microsoft in, is Microsoft in the content business also? I mean, not like the others are.
Well, yeah, Amazon, Microsoft, they kind of, Google, certainly Facebook. I mean, if they are in content, it's all this thing called user-generated content, which is kind of a taboo word if you're in the traditional media industry like a Netflix or a Disney. But user-generated content on Amazon's Twitch. Microsoft has their own Twitch competitor that they called, I think, Mixer.
YouTube, I guess, on Google.
YouTube, certainly. Facebook, Instagram. All of them have user-generated content, which is free content. They don't have to pay $10+ billion for all that content every year.
Would someone buy Netflix?
Would someone buy Netflix? I don't know. I mean, Netflix is pretty pricey right now. That's going to be, I'd say, if Netflix doesn't have as good of a year as I think, or many other people think it will next year, who knows? But it's just, the multiples are very high these days, I think, compared to what their growth prospects actually are.
So what's the future of Google?
You know, privacy is a red herring. Google and Facebook and the tech monopolies are going to be just fine.
The new regime, is it going to be steady as you go, or are they going to go for big stuff?
Leadership.
With Sundar at the helm, I think they'll do just fine. Larry and Sergey really have set the company up for the next few years quite beautifully, with Waymo coming out, operating systems into the car. I mean, they are getting into entirely new industries in a very big way. And I think Google's set up very, very nicely, as well as Amazon. Probably my two top picks out of the FAANG stocks.
Right, and those stocks up. Google up 25% this year. Amazon actually is just up 12% this year, which was a little shocking. But you have Attorney General Bill Barr recently hinting at Justice Department plans to increase scrutiny of big tech regulatory concerns. And they're going to take a look at the decades-old laws that spare companies from liability over user content.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think the Department of Justice and the FTC are looking at this all wrong. What they fail to recognize is that producers are customers. So a supplier on Amazon, a content creator on Google, they are customers as well. And all the regulators need to look at is to say, does the platform put my supplier at a disadvantage? Which they absolutely do. What the regulators are trying to do is say, oh, well, Amazon puts the seller at a disadvantage, which then ultimately puts the buyer at a disadvantage, and they're trying to make this some kind of crazy three-way relationship, and it'll never stick.
Yeah, a lot of people say peak regulatory fears have already arrived, and we passed that. Therefore, like you, they're bullish on this group of stocks continuing their gains into 2020.
Yeah, it's just not, this is a new business model. Well, it's not that new. It's been out over 20 years by now, but still the regulators haven't appreciated that the antitrust precedent still applies, but they're just not applying it in the correct way. So I don't think these tech monopolies really have much to worry about when it comes to antitrust regulation actually sticking in 2020.
What about the Europeans? Are they going to be more aggressive?
They like to just try and sue everybody for everything and see what sticks. And some of it sticks and they get some settlements out of it. But I think the Europeans have been more progressive, but they're still not making this same connection. They're still focusing on privacy, and they're saying, oh, well, you're using Amazon, you're using seller data inappropriately. But they're still trying to bring it back to the consumer and say all of this disadvantages the consumer. They don't need to look at the consumer at all. If they just look at platform and the supplier and focus there, there's meat there, but none of them have wanted to do that.
Two things, Europe, but also the state of California, new privacy laws there go into effect in January. And speaking of Amazon, one of the early employees is now saying break them up. You can't have their core, they sell their items on their platform, and they also sell merchant items, third-party items, and he thinks those businesses should be broken up.
So the California AB5 law, that's what you're talking about, it's a complete disaster. They were trying to put this into place to regulate how Uber and these ride-sharing kind of gig economy platforms interface with their workers. What they have now failed to recognize, just like many politicians, is that there are all these adverse implications of the law. So now you want to be a blogger, you want to write more than 10 articles a month or whatever it is, now you're in trouble. You want to be a truck driver, you want to work X hours a month driving trucks, that's now classified as you being technically a W-2 employee. That's a big problem. So the regulation there is completely misguided, and you know, it's something that the tech monopolies, the tech platforms are trying to battle that, but we'll see if they're able to be successful.
Alex Moazed, thank you very much for the time this morning. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All
Merry
right.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.